Okay, so we are waiting for a few more people before we take a look at this plea deal. And I was trying to do a little deep dive into this in a psychic sort of, I was trying to figure out like what exactly caused this event to come into being. So then I kept being pointed towards the prosecutor. So I just posted like a Brady list thing on on uh, on my feed there. And if somebody already saw that, what's odd is that it was the last one was on my birthday, November 4th. So it just sort of drew my attention to it. Um, I just kept seeing prosecutorial misconduct, and I just kept seeing that psychically. And I'm like, what is the reason this happened? That's part of it. So I'm going to take questions from people I know that are are realizing that, they're followers here, they know what my opinion is, and they aren't going to try to start, some sort of trouble on this. So, if I feel good about it, if I don't feel good about it, the second you start speaking, I'm going to cut it off. So, um, this is a highly charged topic with Bryan Kohberger, especially with his plea deal, especially with the victims, the four victims and their families. And I understand I've worked crime scenes before, I've worked murder cases before, I've worked high profile murder cases before. So I know the stakes. I know what's happening. But this was, I was sort of expecting something because I kept posting about Uranus going into Gemini tomorrow, July 7th. And I said, it's already starting. And that was on July 1st. I started posting, it's already starting, not only with Trump and what's happening there, but just with everybody I am reading. There is something like major twist of fate stuff. So, anyway, my name is Carla Barron. I am a well known psychic. I actually coined the term psychic profiler. When I first started, I did the pilot to Psychic Detectives, so I started that series. And then they held me back for a series called Haunting Evidence, and this was on Court TV. So I know a lot of the commentators and the lawyers that work on Court TV um, because I've appeared on their shows doing commentary, whenever there was a missing person or a murder case of interest, and I happened to be in New York for a meeting or something, they would put me on as a commentator. So that's my background. But this case, I've been involved with this since it first started. Okay. And everybody knows that I was posting on this from day one. It is rare that I do this with a case, that I follow it from beginning to end, but this one is not over yet. I know we have a lot of people saying, oh, it's over. The monster is going to prison. He will die there. He'll never make it out. All this kind of stuff. So, I don't pay attention to that because something is gnawing at me about this, that all of this was inappropriate, the whole thing. It's fine if he actually did this and he came forth with a story. But notice how short his responses were during the plea deal, accepting and saying he was guilty. It was almost like a third grader reading like from a paper. There was the reason there was no emotion is because he was being told to say that. And I'm sorry, that wasn't him. I have read thousands upon thousands of people in decades. Okay. I can tell you for sure he hesitated before the murder charges, as they were listed off one by one, he hesitated. And, I mean, even he can't be the greatest actor in the world. Is he Ted Bundy? I don't think so. He's not cool enough to be Ted Bundy. All right. Sorry, but he's kind of geeky. And yes, he's awkward. Yes, he's awkward with females and social settings. And he's weird. He has OCD. I have OCD. I understand how that can make you appear weird to other people if they see you, but if they just know you have it, it's not a big deal. His is fairly extreme, and so is mine to an effect. Every person that has OCD is different. I've never met two people with the same exact OCD. Everybody has their own rules, everybody's got their own trauma with it and what triggers it. And I'm still going to look at this. I'm going to look at this fresh, and we're going to see what this situation is with this plea deal. But the first thing that I saw moments before I signed on here was prosecutorial misconduct. And Bill Thompson's name kept coming up. And then I was like, why? And then I looked it up for a second, and it looks like something on the Brady list there. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and take a look at what I posted. But this was on November 4th, and I'm like, that's my birthday. So I get weird signals like that from the universe, like, weird connections that make me want to go look further. And read the complaint. It's interesting. So I will entertain questions here because I know a lot of you have questions. Audrey, I'm going to put you on first if you request, because I need to ask you if you've seen that thing I just posted about Bill Thompson. Send me a request here to speak, and I'll put you on. And I just need to look at that for a second, because that was literally what I saw moments before I signed on. All right, so Audrey, are you there? You should be on. Audrey.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You turned it on. Good deal. Okay. So, I mean, maybe what I posted was something from forever ago, but it caught my eye because it was my birthday that this happened on. And I didn't even look for that until I saw prosecutor, Bill Thompson. I kept looking at that because I was trying to come up with, why did this happen now? Why now? Why? I mean, that is the number one question on everybody's mind who doesn't want to see a firing squad, do away with Bryan Kohberger. So it doesn't matter what I think of the death penalty. It matters whether this person actually did it or they're accepting a plea deal because they've been threatened. So he seemed awfully calm for somebody going to prison for the rest of his life. I know there are stories about, he's going into witness protection. He's actually part of the FBI. I'm going to look at all those weird conspiracy. I'll look at them. But Audrey, have you seen that article that I just posted minutes ago?
Yes. That's been around, I don't know.
For a while.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was added to, but that has been out there.
Okay. So I wasn't aware of it until like about 10 minutes ago. So mainly because I'm working so hard, I just don't have time to follow the news and every little thing that crops up.
Well, I'm glad you found it because I forgot it was out there. So it's really good to bring up some of this stuff again.
Well, I'm looking at him, and the only reason I went looking for something like that was because those were the words that were highlighted in my psychic mind's eye as I was asking, why did this happen? Why the plea deal? Why now? I mean, why did, and everybody was trying to explain it away like, oh, the prosecutors had him dead to rights. No, they didn't. No, they did not. So then I looked at that and I was drawn psychically to that article. That's, in fact, the only article I found about him, and I stopped. And then I signed on here. So there's something with that. If I am willing to post that like seconds before we start, that means that there's something there that the universe and this situation, my guides are trying to show me. Okay. Talk to me about this.
Well, I know from looking at the DNA and the evidence, the forensic things in this case, there's definitely something going on for misconduct. I just don't know what.
The thing is, why wasn't some sort of audit done? Why wasn't he brought up on charges like more serious than what was happening? Or was that about to happen and he was racing against the clock?
That could be it. I know he wants to get away from this case and retire.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen, especially when that's the thing I'm looking at. In fact, I didn't even expect to talk about that today. That was something that was being shown to me right prior to me signing on to this podcast. I literally I haven't looked at in fact, I don't even post about the prosecutors. I never have. I think this is the first time I've actually posted about the prosecutors. It's the first time in this whole entire case. So, here's my point. There's something there. Whenever this happens and I'm working on a case file, for a family, or I'm working on a missing persons case, or I'm working for a police department to find some sort of loophole that they missed. This was what was shown to me. I'm going directly to Bill Thompson. I'm sorry, I'm going right there. So I need all my little angels here to start looking at various angles on this. Um, And this is in some case, look, if you knew how busy I was, I mean, I pretty much post every day how many readings I do every single day, including holidays. Okay, so I take a few hours for myself, but I usually go to bed at like 2:30 at night because I'm working on overseas readings here in the United States, various other countries with different time zones. So I don't have time to sit here and conjecture about this, that, or the other thing, or to get on board with some conspiracy theory. I am telling you, the universe pointed me directly like a big arrow at Bill Thompson. People are asking, why did this plea deal happen? That's what happened. It didn't happen because of Ann Taylor. Ann Taylor had nothing to do with it. In fact, I see that she's quite angry, and there was nothing she could do. I just wonder if she was told at the last second and he went in and offered this. Does anybody know that? Was Thompson in there offering this deal to Kohberger without his lawyer being present? Does anybody know the answer to that? Audrey?
No.
That's bugging me now too. Okay. I Either she was engaged in another activity that she had to do legally, and he took that opportunity to undermine her whole thing and go in there and offer him this deal and then threatened him. I'm sorry, I see threats as being part of this. And I think he's also been threatened internally through messages that have gotten to him. So Bryan Kohberger was fearing for his life, number one. But I don't think this went through proper channels through his legal team. And I think it was too late by the time it was done. And the situation was presented in such a dire way that that was the only thing he could do was accept it. I think he was pushed into a corner, and there were other death threats on the table. I think his family was part of that. I think the person that actually did commit these crimes uh, somehow got a message to him. Does Bryan know who this is? I think so, yes. I think that's the part that's a little hazy for people, is that I think he knows who this person is, and he's afraid to say. Maybe it's somebody that fascinated him. Maybe it's somebody that made him feel uh, like he belonged in certain social settings with these girls. That he felt like he could be in a room with them as long as he had this person next to him. I don't know. All I know is that I see a setup. That whole sheath situation, I'm sorry, that was I I can't count the number of crime scenes I've worked on, and that was the most ridiculous uh, piece of evidence I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I laughed out loud when I saw it. Not at the deaths, of course not. But I laughed when I saw how how oddly it was placed. It's like if you're gonna like pin this on somebody, at least choose a place to put the sheath that looks real. To me, the whole thing looked staged, very fake. And I am basing this on other crime scenes where I have seen suicides, where they leave cleaning materials out for the person that finds them to clean it up. I mean, it's very gruesome. And I have to just look at it in a very clinical way, and I react later. I try not to react, but if I do react because I feel a personal connection, I react later. Like with Natalie Holloway, I reacted later to that, and that one hurt me, um, because I felt like I was connected to her. Um, but this case, I'm telling you for sure, that that sheath was placed there, and it was placed in a very odd, stupid way. I mean, it wasn't even in a way that somebody actually thought that through. These are the things that were standing out to me from the beginning. It just that whole situation with the sheath. I don't care about the DNA. They could easily get his DNA on there. That's not the thing. It was the way they placed it with the body. It was so just amateur hour. Like, if you're gonna do it right, Like, if you're gonna really try to cover up, do it right, and you would think the prosecutor would know how to do that. It was so amateur hour compared to other high-profile murder cases that I've worked. I mean, serial killers that I've worked, where it takes them a really long time to figure out, like, based on the evidence. The thing is that this evidence, the placement of the sheath, more than the DNA on the button, okay, more than that. That's what bugged me about it. It was like highly convenient and lazy. It was a lazy way of trying to pin this on somebody. So, in my opinion, okay. So, Audrey, what's your question for me?
Um,
Does any of that make any sense?
yeah, because it's most likely not his DNA anyway, because the natural state of trace DNA is a mixture. So even if it was planted, that makes sense. I mean, I totally agree with that. And
It's almost like somebody took a piece of tape, they lifted a partial off of something else that he touched, like a glass or something, and they put it on the button. It would have been more ingenious to maybe take a blood smear or something, his blood on there. That would have been better. But this it was too perfect with the button, and it was partial. Like that was just too amateur hour for me. And look, if you are going to pin this on somebody and you need someone to take the fall for this because your community is reeling because four college students, beautiful souls have been murdered in such a horrific way, and everyone is scared, and the whole college community is going to fall apart. The financial state of that community is done. No one wants to go there. No one wants to send their children there to go to school, and it's just not safe. So, they had to do something because there was no way they were going to find who did it without the actual weapon. And this whole thing about him driving around and like parking outside, I do feel like he is either familiar with or knows who the person is that did this. But I don't think it was just one. I see two guys, and neither guy, I'm going to check this psychically with my cards here. I have regular playing cards like I use every single day just to keep my hands busy. I am going to look to see if either of the two males that I see that committed this crime were Bryan Kohberger. Let me ask that right now. The two guys that I see, the two males that I see committing this crime, these four souls, I get one was on one floor and one was on another floor. And I get one was hiding, like for a while, hiding in a closet or something. Let me look. Like one was sent up to investigate while party stuff was going on and then hid there for hours. And then I see the other one coming up and saying, okay, we're on, or texting or whatever, we're on. And let me just look at Bryan Kohberger. Is he one of them? Is he one of the two that I see that committed this heinous crime? Did Bryan Kohberger commit this crime of murder? Yeah, again, no. And I still get a woman with darker hair. Is she knows who did it. She knows the person who did it. And has she done drugs before? Yes, she has, because I see that her bloodstream is altered. And she knows who did it. And she's familiar, and she knows the people in the house. I don't know if she's one of the ones that lived there, but she knows them. Was this a burglary? That was the other thing that bugged me, was that I don't think so. I'm going to look at that again. Was this an actual burglary, or did they make it look like one? Was this a burglary? Um, well, I think because there were drugs involved at some point that they were looking for anything of value. But I don't think that this was a burglary per se, like that was the intent and that was only the intent, and then other people had to be killed because they were witnesses. I don't think that at all. I think that certain words were said by these young victims, especially the two girls, Maddie and Kaylee. And I think that they made statements and it was taken the wrong way by these people. And that was it. That was the trigger right there. And it was definitely planned because I see this person hiding upstairs while this party was going on. So this person was up there for a number of hours hiding. Um, there are two people. Is Bryan Kohberger one of the two that committed this crime? No. I think they knew ahead of time that he would be the one they would pin this on. They needed somebody to that was goofy enough and geeky enough that they could just do this. He was awkward enough and they're like, "Oh, he's our guy." I'm telling you, some of this was so amateur hour. I don't think the killers placed that sheath at all. I think that sheath was placed after the fact, and I'm going to say it out loud, by law enforcement. Come and get me. I mean, just come and get me. At this point, I don't care what people think, but this is what I'm seeing. Audrey, any
Oh my
comments?
god, that was my first gut reaction when I first heard about this case. Was like, the police planted that. That's so crazy.
Yeah, I just see that they needed something because they were like, it was an afterthought. I get that somebody said, "You know what? We're finding nothing here. There's like literally nothing, and we have to have some answers." So they went through the first sweep, and there was nothing. There was nothing. They didn't have anything at all, and there was no way they wanted to face their own firing squad with the public, in that community. It was a small town community. I was raised in a small town community, so I know how they are. And there was no way they didn't have any answers. The phones were ringing off the hook. They had no answers. So, any other question? And then you can come back and ask another one if you think, Audrey. Any other question right now?
Do you see anything if Bryan did get that internship at the police department?
Okay, you're gonna have to remind me what this is. This was like when he was going to school or something,
Yeah.
and okay. And what police department was this
It
for?
was Pullman. I'm just wondering if he actually got that, and I don't know if that's how the police
Let me
knew
look. Let
him.
me look. Did Bryan Kohberger actually receive that internship? Was he approved? Let me look. Mm-mm-mm. It's weird. I see that he was, but there was somebody ahead of him, and it may have even been a female that was ahead of him that had a slot ahead of him. Does that make sense with anything you know? Because that's what I'm seeing. Audrey?
Yes, I had heard that too, but I didn't know if that was
No,
true.
I didn't hear that. I don't know. First of all, I don't know anything about that because I haven't. I know you live and breathe Bryan Kohberger, but I literally haven't looked at it for a long time. So I don't know some of these details. I'm seeing them for the first time right now. And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that there was somebody that had either applied before him or they needed to get a girl in there first because they had certain requirements, something. And I think she was doing a thesis or something, and it was time sensitive. I'm not really sure, but that's what I'm seeing with that. So he was in line to be there, but not for a while, not until she was done. So come back with other questions. Let me know. Just, you know, let me know if you raise your hand or something if you need me to put you back on. I'm going to take another question here. All right, Annie. I don't know Annie, but Annie, you're on. Annie, are you there?
Hi, hello.
Hey, I don't know you, but I'm going to take a chance. Okay. So,
Hi. Yeah,
all
I
right.
wasn't sure if I would get through or not. You just came up on my page a few days ago.
Okay.
So I'm not
Well, I
familiar
mean,
with
as long as
your.
you behave yourself and you act with decorum, we're good here. All right. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what is your question?
My question was, I guess I didn't have so much of a question as I do a kind of question slash comment on what you said earlier about Bill Thompson.
Yeah.
Um, because I've been following this case on and off since it happened, and then for a while I hadn't been, and then in the recent months I kind of got back into following it. And from some of the court filings that came up in the pretrial motions, really seemed like um, Bill Thompson and the I think she's the second prosecutor, Ashley Jennings,
Mm-hmm.
um, were keeping things that were either discovery or something else. And I'm not really sure about the details, but it was just kind of what you said about there being, possibly prosecutorial misconduct seems to fit in with the sort of vibe that a lot of people following the case through like the each of the motions and things like that we're sort of picking up on. I don't know if you're familiar with Cy Ray, the defense's expert with cell phone data.
No, go ahead and talk about it.
So Cy Ray was this I guess he had 20 years and so forth experience in forensic digital evidence. He's always been called as an expert for the prosecution, so this would have been the first case where he was testifying on behalf of the defense. And what
Right.
he had said was that the prosecution claimed that during the time that Bryan's cell phone was off, um, or out of signal or something like that during the time frame of the murders, was that he could access that information via his contacts, Cyray's contacts at the FBI, and that they could pin down Bryan's location that would validate his alibi. And Judge Hippler basically threw that out and kind of accused Cyray of being like a conspiracy theorist because Cyray was positing that the prosecution was hiding that exculpatory information. And the judge basically threw it out, and then it kind of, went away. And this was in the last like 5 or 6 months that this came up in a hearing. And
That
a
I
lot of
get.
the.
Well, I don't know if you know how I work, but when I see things, especially like when I'm in psychic mode and I'm seeing things on a crime scene, if it flashes in my head, some part of that statement is incorrect, but
Mhm.
nothing flashed about what you just said. It was all accurate.
Yeah,
Nothing
and
flashed at all. Like it was all true.
and
Like I
and
have
I'm
a
not
BS meter that goes off. That's a psychic BS meter, kind of like um,
yeah.
it's like I for some reason I'm able to see, and that's why CEOs will hire me to see who's embezzling and who's
Mhm.
you know, which employees should they hire, which ones are trouble, which ones are, you know, taking money from the company, whatever. And they'll go down a list, and when the name is said, it'll flash in my head if it's them.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah,
Yeah, there's
that's
something weird
really
about that. So,
fascinating. But I don't, I'm not gifted or anything like that, but I tend to have, I guess, just sort of gut reactions, and the past few days especially, where just something about this entire plea deal has not just it just hasn't felt right with me on a gut level. And
oh, this was all orchestrated for sure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there
And
is
as
no
soon as
way in hell that, you know, and as far as like, I'm going to look, since we talked about conspiracy theories, I want to look just real quick and get this out of the way. Is Bryan Kohberger going into witness protection? Because that's been asked at
that's one
various.
that I've heard. I'm not sure I put much stock in that, but
Yeah, let me
maybe.
let me just look to see. Just let me cross it off my list because I like to be thorough. So let me look. Is Bryan Kohberger going into witness protection at any time here? No. In fact, he is giving uh he's being deposed still about the other evidence they're coming up with, and a private investigation is going on as we speak. That's what I'm being shown.
Oh, that's interesting.
Uh,
Um,
Even if he goes away, he thinks it's worth it to uncover who did this. Like, that's his sacrifice to this whole thing. It's like, look, I'll sacrifice myself if we get to the bottom of this.
and that's sort of what I feel like, again, just kind of going by what I've, picked up from the motions that have gone through, like the pretrial motions, and just sort of getting a general sense of, again, I'm not, psychic or anything like that, but I generally have like gut feelings about people, and I've
Well,
never
everybody
thought that
has
Brian.
everybody has
Yeah,
some amount of psychic ability, you know, whether you can
yeah.
call upon it every day like I do, where it becomes your calling is a special thing. But you know, everybody has those moments. Everybody does.
Yeah, and I've never felt that Brian was the person, and I did kind of feel like, especially as we have neared the trial, and it was a matter of, we're coming up on just a few weeks, they would have had jury selection. It seems like, almost like Brian doing this is, part of it might have to do with taking some of the heat off of himself, in the sense that, like, the media has been going crazy with with their narratives, and then there was like a book coming out, and like I think Amazon Prime released like a documentary and stuff. And when you have all that noise of, whether it's misinformation or not, I don't know, but like when you have all that noise surrounding what should be kind of a factual, process, then it gets very muddled. And so part of, I think, maybe taking himself kind of out of the equation with the trial, and sort of giving the news media, public, whoever, this sort of like nice neat bow to tie on it, then maybe that's part of, okay, let's clear up some of this noise so that answers can still be found without getting, uh without being so much on the radar as it has been, especially in the past couple months nearing the
Well, and
trial,
I
if that
think
makes sense.
that was a very eloquent way of putting it.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, it's not that he is all of a sudden Saint Brian, you know,
Right,
where
right.
he's, you know, but I do feel like he was willing to sacrifice some time in prison. First of all, he's curious about all that anyway. You know, he's just naturally curious about all of this.
Mhm.
So who better to place themselves in the middle of it? Is he undercover for the FBI? That was another
Mhm.
theory that was posited. You know, is he undercover? And I will look at that just to get that off the table. Is Bryan Kohberger undercover, working undercover for law enforcement? Okay. No, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have access to like police scanners or those apps,
Hmm.
and that he kept like that would lull him to sleep some nights, like he would just listen to that.
That's interesting. Yeah, he seems like, 'cause you know, he was getting his we were told that he was getting his PhD in that area and everything. So it's really
But
interesting that
yeah, I
he
think he
ended up
had
in
it
this
on in the
position.
background. Like I'm picking up that
Hmm.
he like this was, playing in the background, and like if he heard something interesting, he would turn it up.
Hmm. Yeah, which I think is not really unusual for people who are interested in that line of work. Um, you know, but and true crime has become such a phenomenon, you know, in recent years with you know, just how much interest people have in this kind of thing. So so yeah, it's all very interesting, and it's all very uh you know, it all begs a question of, you know, why are there so many holes in this story? Why is this person in particular? How did he kind of become the person of interest? What you said
Well, the
about
thing
the
is that it's not over either, and that's the one thing I wanna tell people today. This isn't
Mhm,
over by far, and I see a private investigation behind the scenes that they kept going. That's why you saw Ann Taylor placing her hand on his arm like that, like,
mhm.
"Don't worry, we got you. We got you."
Yeah, I
Like,
thought that that was
we're gonna keep
interesting.
working on this, we're gonna keep working on this, and when
Mhm.
the time comes, all this will come to light.
I hope so, because I think that the thing that concerns me most about, you know, because you don't want to think that somebody innocent is going to be, you know, serving so much time, but any time at all, really, for something they didn't do. But so many people have, even people who had questions about this investigation and whatnot, seem to have kind of come over to the camp. Well, he said he did it, so I guess he did it, and that's that. And I would hope
Well, I
that
mean,
there
the
continues to
thing
be
is
people
that
who are like,
people
well.
generally people generally just, you either I have never been one to be a be a follower or to be one of the sheep that's just led by,
Mhm,
whoever the leader is. It's like I'm constantly pioneering, blazing trails, pioneering in some sort of new path just
mhm,
because I don't accept it just because somebody said it.
right,
Like I need to know why.
right, and I'm the same way, and I think that the team that Bryan had for his defense is the same way as well. So it does give me hope to know that hopefully they'll keep, you know, working on things in the background, and that you know, there are so few people now after this has all come about that seem to be even willing to talk about it, let alone continue to try to solve the puzzle. And I'm not saying that's any of our job to solve the crime or anything, but I
No,
just think
no.
that, like, you know, there are still questions that need to be answered, that you know, that this is not really like the kind of it's all tied up nice and neat with a bow that the prosecution wants us to think it is.
No, but I think that Bill Thompson needs to watch his butt right now because I'm seeing eh, I'm usually known for my timing. Like if you read my testimonials on my website, there's like if you put the word timing in the search bar, you'll
Mhm.
see all the ones that refer to timing when I have done certain predictions. So
Mhm.
for better for worse, I have been known for knowing timing on things, and I'm seeing that as soon as September hits, a lot of this stuff that's been hidden away, all the secretive stuff is going to start coming out in the light of day. And Bill Thompson needs to be worried right now. I don't care if he took a new job. I don't care what his situation is. He needs to be worried that somebody kept copies.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you know, nothing goes away, I think, you know, even if uh you know, people are like, "Oh, it's done, it's put away, we're moving on," and whatnot. Like, things have a way of revealing themselves, and sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes, you know, it just comes when
Well,
people are not expecting it. So I hope that that's
you know
you
what?
know,
And
we see that.
it's not that I don't practice what I preach. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm a person that, I'll just tell a personal story real quick. Um, I I went to Carnegie Mellon. Okay, so I was a voice major,
Mhm.
but when I first auditioned, like 6 months before that, I had laryngitis.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I was auditioning as a voice major, as a singer with laryngitis. So they could tell I had training, but like,
Mhm.
they couldn't hear the tone of my voice or anything. So, you know, I had a lot of nerve even showing up for the audition at that point.
Right. Mhm.
But I went with my dad, and okay, so there was that. And then I got the rejection letter from
Mhm.
Carnegie Mellon saying, sorry, but
Right.
not this time. So, but psychically, I knew I had a
Mhm.
dream. I knew I was supposed to go to that school.
Mhm.
So I was at odds with myself psychically. I'm like,
Mhm.
you know, I know I'm supposed to be there because I see myself there attending classes and not some other place. I knew it was there.
Mhm.
And I had applied to Oberlin, Eastman, and some of the other schools as well.
Mhm.
In fact, my dad wanted to send me to law school for some reason. And I'm like, no, 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 no. um, so he wanted to send me to Duquesne for law school. So I'm like, no, no, that's all right. And it was the end of July, and I hadn't picked a school yet. I got into Oberlin, I got into Eastman. I knew neither one was going to fit me. And I
Mhm.
knew that's not where I was supposed to go. That was not my fate. I was not supposed to go there. So my dad is barbecuing chicken at the pool. I'm like, I remember it was like I don't know, Monday afternoon or he was barbecuing chicken. It was a hot day, and he said, "You need to pick a school, Carla, and just stop this." And I said, "No, I am." I said, "Look, I'm going to do one more thing because this is how much I know I'm supposed to go there. I'm going to call them." He said, "You're going to do what?" And I said, "I'm going to call the dean of music there."
Wow.
So I went up into my mother's office and I locked the doors, and it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just remembered like, oh, I hope he's still there, right?
Mhm.
So I called and I said, I told him who I was. He said, hold on, let me grab the transcript. And he read the notes. He said, look, your grades are perfect. I was valedictorian, so there was no problem there.
Mhm.
And he said, we just couldn't hear the tone of your voice. Those were the notes. They could tell you had training,
Mhm.
but the tone of your voice was just missing because you had laryngitis. And I said, I understand that. I said, but look, I said, for some reason, I know I'm supposed to go there. Like I'm telling this guy, and he's like, who the hell is this girl? Right. So I said, I just know I'm supposed to go there. I said, I'm going to make you a deal. So I'm
Mhm.
like saying this to the dean, I'm
Oh
going to
my
make
gosh,
you a
wow.
deal, and I said, if I am not one of the best students to come out of that university, you could personally walk over to me and ask me to leave, and I'll smile and say thank you very much, and
Wow.
I'll leave.
Mhm.
And there was dead silence for like 30 seconds, and I'm
Oh
like,
my
oh my god, I just ruined my life.
gosh.
And he said, well, Miss Barron, I have never heard anything like that in my life. He said, welcome to Carnegie Mellon. I'll see you in the fall. He said, you're going to have to get other housing off campus. But he said,
Wow.
I've never heard anything like that before. And he said, I want to meet you when you get here. And he knew who I was. He walked right up to me when
Mhm.
orientation was happening. He walked right up to me and
Wow.
he said, you must be Carla Barron. And I said, yes, I am. He said, how did
Oh
you
my
know?
goodness.
And he said, "Oh, I just had a feeling."
Wow.
And I was one of 20 students in that class,
Hmm.
and only 4 in the class graduated at the end of 4 years, and I was one
Wow.
of them with high honors. So,
Wow.
I made good on my promise. So,
Hmm.
I practice what I preach.
Right. Yeah.
Even though everybody else was telling me at the last minute, I knew to
Hmm.
stay with it. And I am telling you this story because I am telling you there's more to come with Bryan Kohberger. It's not over. He doesn't go away to prison, and that's the last we hear about this.
Yeah. And I
This isn't this isn't like a, you know, like a Scott Peterson situation. This isn't
right.
like that at all. This
Right.
is where, he is sacrificing part of his life so that he can learn about this process and correct it, and hopefully make a contribution to correcting this and bringing corruption to light.
Hmm. I hope so. I feel like we are in a we're seeing, I don't know if you followed like the Karen Reed trial or not, in Massachusetts, but I think in general we're seeing more transparency in our court systems, and
Yeah.
a lot of these people who are used to being able to cover things up and get away with corruption and whatnot are now being kind of having a light shown on them and on the process that sort of lets them continue to manipulate the system for their own gain as opposed to for justice. And that
Well, and
doesn't sit
you'll
right with
notice,
people.
with the planetary aspects that are happening right now, with Uranus going into Gemini tomorrow, let
Hmm.
me tell you, we'll start seeing very shocking twist of fate stuff,
Hmm.
including Donald Trump and that whole situation,
Yeah,
and with
and
Elon
I'm
Musk,
very
you
interested to
know?
see how that all plays out. And like and I appreciate you giving me the chance to speak. I don't want to take too much time if anyone else wants to speak, but like I said, you came up on my page a couple of days ago because I was kind of in the Bryan Kohberger hashtag because this didn't feel right to me. I did go to your website and I looked at some of your testimonials and some of your previous um, predictions and things like that, and just very much like what you had to say. And I wanted to hear your take on this because it's right. Right now, like I said, there's very few people who are even willing to still entertain possibilities of this not being the end. And so
Well,
it's very much,
and you can
you
see
know,
that I don't really listen to,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sort of
which
a
is,
lone wolf. I don't really listen to other people's opinions and take it as my own,
mhm.
unless of course that's how I feel. But welcome to my page and all my stuff, and I will see more of you as we do more of these.
Thank you so much,
Um,
and thank you again for everything and for being able to and willing to have this conversation. So,
of course, and I will, we're going to do more Bryan Kohberger uh, special psychic podcasts coming up, but this plea deal certainly warranted today's. But thank you for the contribution. Anybody else have any other questions they want to ask here? If you do, just send me a request. I'll put you on. If you want to ask a question about something that has just been gnawing at you about this whole situation, and you're just not sure, now's the time to ask, or I will just keep going. But as far as Bryan Kohberger working undercover, I think I think it's like a possible future thing in the future should this all come to pass. Oh, that's a question I can ask. Let me ask. Will Bryan Kohberger spend the rest of his life in prison? Let's just ask. I mean, let's just ask. The more simple the question, the better, because then I'm able to see like a broad spectrum of what's going on. So, is Bryan Kohberger going to spend the rest of his born days in prison? Is that going to happen? Is that going to happen? Is Bryan Kohberger going to spend the rest of his life in prison? I keep seeing things about, evidence, and I know in our certain court system, and how the law works at this point, because he accepted this. But you know what? Laws are being rewritten, as we're seeing with Donald Trump and that whole situation. Laws are being rewritten every single day. So I don't care what it says now. I don't care what it says now, because I'm seeing that other evidence is going to come to light about this case. And I'm seeing other people involved, friends of friends, and some of this is going to come forward. They're going to be offered like immunity if they come forward and say this and that. I'm hearing the word immunity. So I think that was their biggest fear, is that they would go to prison. And I think certain things are going to be happening. I think Bryan Kohberger is certainly feeling more freedom in speaking now that he's being sent to prison. You know, I think that he feels like a little more freedom now. Like, he's no longer feeling under that secret gag order, where he can't say what's really happening. There's a lot more freedom coming forth with the truth, with his testimony, with what he knows to be true, with the people that he knows that are involved in this. I think he knows a lot of things now, and all they have to do is prove it. They just needed more time to prove it. That's why I see this private investigation going on. I don't think Ann Taylor has stopped at all. I think that's what the hand on the arm was at the end of and why she smiled at him and she said, "Look, we're going to keep going. You be safe, you be good, and when it's time, you'll know." And I think that's what's going on. I think they have more to do. I don't think they're going to stop at all. And I'm not delusional, people. Like I said, I graduated valedictorian. I'm not just some random idiot psychic person. I actually am quite intelligent. But I'm telling you what I honestly see, and I am known for seeing. So come hell or high water, this is what I'm seeing right now. This could change. Yes, it could change. But right now, this is the path. Is Bryan Kohberger going to spend his life in prison? Yes or no? Again, I'm seeing Ann Taylor. I'm seeing the month of September is very interesting, with some new information that's going to come out. It might not be new to everybody, but it'll be new information, new material that's being presented. New evidence is coming to light that's irrefutable. I don't think Bryan cares as much about himself as he does about setting things right. And yes, he's trying to protect his family from this whole thing. In fact, some of his family members, his siblings, don't understand what he's doing and they think he's crazy pants. That's fine. I mean, my siblings thought the same thing, but here I am. Um, I don't really take that into account. If they're mad that their lives were tainted by this whole situation, well, that's group karma. That's family karma. That's what happens when you choose family members before you are even coming into this lifetime. You choose those family members to work karmic threads through so that you assimilate those lessons in that lifetime. That's what it's all about. So they chose this, for better, for worse. Audrey, you have a question?
Oh yeah, I wanted to know if you could see any like news headlines or stories that would come out anytime in the future about the Idaho State um, Police Forensics Lab.
Okay, hold on. I've never been asked that way before, but let me just look. Let me see what happens when I ask that. And let's see what comes forward. Okay. Again, I'm getting September timeframe. I am seeing Ann Taylor, so she seems to still be involved. Whether she's technically involved or officially involved, I don't think she cares. I think she's doing this to set things right. I think she was very angry about this whole thing. And let me look at law enforcement, forensics lab. What do we got with this? What do we got with the forensics lab? Okay, this is what I'm being shown. I'm being shown that there are items missing. Items missing. Evidence is missing. That was supposed to be there. Something like that. Items were missing. That's the first thing that I'm seeing. The second thing I'm seeing is oh, interesting. All right. So, second thing I'm seeing is a payoff. Somebody was paid off. And there's a money trail. And as much as they try to hide it, it will be discovered, it will be found. So there will be some sort of investigation or internal investigation on this thing. Something like that. I don't know if that's that's not a concise headline, but I'm not a reporter. So does that help?
Yes, that's great.
Okay. So anybody else have any other questions about? Oh, I didn't finish my question about whether he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Will Bryan Kohberger spend the rest of his natural life in prison? Let me look. Is I don't know her name, but you said on the defense team there was a woman with dark hair.
Eliza Mathis?
Okay. She's coming up here twice now, so I have to bring her up. She's going to town. She's got files and files. She's like a dog with a bone. She is not letting this go at all. At all. And again, during the month of August, we'll start seeing that she's been sort of digging around. So we may see some sort of news about that. Annie, you had a question?
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that because I was watching this YouTuber who had gone to one of the hearings in April. So he went to sit in the courtroom, and I think it was I don't remember what particular stuff was being litigated at that point, but he kind of came back and said that it seemed like Bryan and Elisa Massouth, this dark-haired attorney, had a real
Mhm.
bond. He said that, more so than with Ann Taylor, Bryan seemed to be very communicative with her. That like during the breaks and whatnot, like he would be talking to her a lot and things like that. So it's interesting that you see that and that came up because it seems like more than the other attorneys, she's the one that Bryan seemed to have a real connection with and kind of a bond with, in their
Well,
working
and I think it's
relationship.
because they're both highly, um, I think they may both be on the spectrum, you know?
Hmm.
And I'm probably borderline spectrum myself. I mean, I have OCD to a, a frightening degree, and I don't really, let people know that. But I mean, people that know me and read with me quite often know I have it. So, if something happens in an OCD way and I have to go clean it right there and then, that's what has to happen. So, like, don't talk to me until I'm done. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, like I said, everybody has their own rules with the OCD thing, and their own set of internal triggers and compensational, uh, sort of reactions to it. So, I think in light of the two of them, I see them as being birds of a feather.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that seems to be that's the impression that I got from what the YouTuber who had gone to the courtroom and sat there and and kind of watched them and whatnot, seemed to report back to his audience was that it seemed like they just really had a good chemistry and a good working relationship and everything. Not.
Because she's intuitive to the process.
Mhm.
She she knows, like, what it looks like when somebody's hiding something. She knows what it looks like when something is out of balance. And I'm telling you, a person that has marked OCD cannot stop until they finish it. Like right now, I'm in the middle of talking about all this. I have no idea how long this podcast is going to go, but it's going to go for as long as it goes, and until I get answers,
Yeah, and I
and
definitely identify with that. I don't have OCD, but I do have ADHD pretty intensely.
you know what, all of
So it's
those
kind of.
all of those are cousins of each
Yeah,
other.
yeah, it's all kind of under the same umbrella when it comes to, being like dogs with bones. So, but yeah, that was just really interesting and jumped out at me, that came up for you, because, and I wanted
Well,
to share that info with you in case,
no, thank you for telling me. I think that, you know, it's good that I don't know every little thing about the Bryan Kohberger case, because I come to it with fresh eyes, and I use the skills that I use every single day when I'm working, which is why I have, you know, I'm fortunate that I can do this full time, and I wake up every day like loving what I do. So,
hmm
and
that's
I think you can tell that I really like what I do, and
yeah,
very few
yeah.
people, you know, I I just hope that some of this, from what I can see, usually with timing with me, unless there's some sort of free will interjection into the whole thing, the timing will complete as seen.
hmm
I see that in, like, August seems to be with the dark haired attorney, coming up with some of this stuff, but then I see major activity in September.
that's really
Major
interesting. I
content,
really
something
yeah.
like major twist of fate stuff again. I mean, it's a lot of this is going to come full circle. So it's funny. I keep asking, is he going to prison for life? None of those answers are coming up. Is Bryan Kohberger going to spend his life in prison? Yes or no? Well, the person, one of the two that I saw that had committed this crime, uh, are guilty of sending, you know, death threats of some, whether veiled or not, against Bryan and his family and anyone he loves. And I think that that's a real that's a real concern. So at that point, he might have to go into witness protection, you know. Um, but I think because Bryan knows the guy's name, um, I I'm not really sure if it's going to be necessary. I think that's what this person's, why they're throwing these death threats around, is because they know he knows a lot of what happened. So Could he have stopped it? Probably not. I think it was just it was something of a social situation where he was curious as to, you know, parties like this and hanging out with people that are so pretty and whatever. I don't think it was anything but just a geeky kid that just wanted to be in the midst of all these pretty people. And I think he knows much more than what he's saying. And I don't think even Ann Taylor knows everything, or this other dark-haired attorney. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting her name. I don't even know who it is. But I think that now he feels the freedom to come out and say a lot of this stuff now and share it. So names are going on that list, times, dates, activities, where to look next. And Bryan, I'm sorry, Bryan will be involved at in to a great extent, pointing them in the direction of where they need to look next. See, I think he was up close to these people, and I don't think he had any idea it was going to go this far. He's used to people saying, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to marry her one day, or I'm going to do, he's used to people just saying things, but he never thought that all of that was going to happen. I think the two girls, Maddie and Kaylee, said something just in the moment, and they didn't even really mean anything, and it was taken in such a derogatory way. I think that's what caused this to go into motion. With the two, with the one guy, and then he had the other guy, he goes, you go upstairs, find a hiding place, and just get up there. So I definitely see two people. I definitely see that Bryan Kohberger knows these guys. I don't know how well he knows them. Maybe they just said, hey, you want to come to a party? You have to drive or something. It could have been as simple as that. And I get that, he was just thirsty for any type of social interaction like that because he's usually not invited, So just my opinions and my psychic impressions here, which again, I tend to be known for. So, any other questions from you guys? This has been great. Like a lot of stuff that I didn't know is coming out during this thing. Anybody else have any other questions that have been just burning and you need to ask, to see what I might be able to see? And if not, we'll do another one of these. We'll keep these going as more information comes out. But this is kind of the thread that I'm looking at right now. Annie, you had a final question?
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to keep kind of jumping in. One of the things that doesn't make sense to me is the dog. I think that the dog belonged to Kaylee, and I guess the report of the story is that the dog was found like in a room, not in a crate or anything, and had no like blood on him or anything like that, and it seems very logistically weird. So I wondered if there's any detail about the dog, whether is significant, or like is the truth, like what's going on with the dog, I guess, is the
Okay,
question.
let me look. What's the dog's name?
I think it's Murphy.
Murphy. Okay, let me look at Murphy for a second. Murphy, what happened with you? Okay. Murphy, were you moved to this other room by one of the killers? Okay. Yeah, I see one of the two that I had seen that entered the house, the one that went upstairs, um, gave Murphy something to eat and was very friendly with the dog. And so Murphy didn't bark or, I mean, I see that a treat was given right away. Um, and he just, you know, gave a lot of affection to Murphy and then put Murphy in the other room. And then he hid in the same room. I think he hid in that room in the closet.
Interesting. Thank you.
What room was that the
I'm not
dog was in?
I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think that it was in Kaylee's room, but she was in Maddie's room. So I think that he was in Kaylee's room. The dog, I guess, was in there alone
But
or
yeah,
something
and
like that.
the point I'm making is that I see the dog and this person in the same room.
Yeah, and
Person
I
that's
think
hiding.
that would fit with I think what was reported about how I guess if the person was in one of the girls' bedrooms upstairs, then um then that maybe he expected one of the girls to be
Well,
in
and
there or
he had
something. But
treats. He had treats to give the dog.
yeah, and that's
So
kind of the main
so
thing is
he
that the
knew
dog
that there
wouldn't
was a
bark
dog in
or
the house. Like he was familiar enough with the house that he knew
yeah.
there was a dog there, and he knew the dog was familiar with him.
So
So
do
he had
you
been there before.
So it was probably one of these two guys is someone who was known to the victims.
He had been in that house before for sure.
Okay. That's
And I think the dog was familiar with him and
mhm.
his scent,
Yeah, that would
because
make sense
I don't
because
get
like
that the dog was reacting to him like he was anything other than a friend.
yeah, and that's the thing that one of the things that didn't make sense is like why wouldn't the dog bark for like a stranger or something like that? But like there's no report of the dog barking or doing anything unusual. So like if the dog, was being treated well, friendly, given treats, that would make sense.
And there could have been like, like in the treats, there could have been like some sort of like a
Like
sleeping
right,
agent.
like a relaxant or something.
Yeah, yeah, to calm the dog down.
Yeah, and that's something that I had wondered about too, because yeah, because logistically it didn't really make a lot of sense as to
Did
why
they
the
test
dog
the
wouldn't.
dog? Did
I don't
they did they
I don't think so. I hadn't seen anything about the dog being tested.
And by the time they thought about it, it was probably too late anyway. They probably weren't concerned.
Probably, yeah. I think that the dog was kind of an afterthought for a long time, and then because from what I know, Kaylee and owned the dog with her ex-boyfriend, so I think after the crime scene was discovered and everything, the dog went with the ex and was kind of just an afterthought for a long time. So
But
so I doubt
I,
there's any testing or anything.
from that question though, I get that the perpetrator that was hiding upstairs in a closet was in the same room with the dog. That's what I'm getting.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you. That
I
makes a lot of
see,
sense and it's
well, I
interesting.
see what I can see, and then,
Yeah.
if that helps in some way, that's great. That's why police departments will call me, because I'll be able to see something they maybe missed, or, like just some tiny detail that leads them in a new direction, and it's just fresh eyes, you
Hmm.
know?
Definitely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. So anybody else with any questions before we wrap it up here? Other than that, I will put this, I will make sure I import this up to all the platforms. It'll be on the Psychic Carla Barron podcast on my website. So it should be up within the hour, and I'll put it up. And this was actually good because a lot of this stuff I didn't know. And that shows you how I work, how my brain works. My psychic brain will dissect this thing, and it's good that I don't know everything because I don't have any preconceived notions. Um, I think Bryan will work with the investigators. I think he is going to be uh, a main component of the investigation, the private investigation that's going on behind the scenes. And I don't think this is stopping at all. So people want to call me crazy, fine. My block on this site is, I don't pay attention to these people. It's like, go ahead and say your worst, because I'm just going to block you, report you, block you, and then I'll hide your replies. So I really don't care. Um, I'm not here. I don't get paid for my content. I just do this out of the goodness of my heart to see what we can see. And this is what I'm good at. So this is my way of giving back however I can. Okay. Guys, this was great. Join us next time. And I'll have this up within the hour, and you can see it. I'll post when it's up on the main import, and then you can look on your favorite listening platforms, and it should be there. And it's on my website under Psychic Podcasts, and you'll see it under the Psychic Carla Barron. Again, happy 4th of July weekend. It's been a wild ride, but we're not done. Okay, we're not done. Thank you for joining the live. You guys were perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.